My name is Nick, and at 32 years old, I had given 12 years of my life to military service. This Christmas was going to be special. After 4 years away, I was finally heading home. I had bought the perfect gifts, arranged the flights, and was ready to surprise everyone. Then my phone buzzed. A message from my father. "Christmas is better without you. Better not come." My heart sank. I only replied, "Understood." I canceled everything. 5 days later, my phone exploded with 10 missed calls from my family, including one from their lawyer, as I share how my Christmas homecoming turned into a family courtroom drama. Let me know where you are watching from, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. I grew up in Millfield, one of those small Midwestern towns where everyone knows your business before you do. Our house was the white colonial, with the perfect lawn on Maple Street. From the outside, we looked like the quintessential American family. From the inside, well, that was a different story. My father, Richard, was the kind of man who wore disappointment like cologne. No matter what I achieved, it never measured up to his standards. When I brought home, he would ask why they weren't a pluses. When I won second place in the state wrestling championship, he wondered aloud why I couldn't have been first. "Nothing was ever good enough. You need to learn discipline, Nick," he would say, his voice always carrying that edge of disapproval. Success requires sacrifice and perfection. My mother, Margaret, was the eternal peacemaker. Whenever tensions rose between my father and me, she would swoop in with fresh cookies or a change of subject. "Richard, tell Nick about that client you impressed today." Or, "Nick, your father worked 14 hours yesterday to provide for this family." She meant well, but her mediation often felt like she was taking his side. Then there was my older sister, Rachel. She was everything I wasn't in my father's eyes: valedictorian, full scholarship to Yale, and eventually a successful corporate attorney. She could do no wrong, while I could do no right. I never resented Rachel herself, but I resented being forever trapped in her shadow. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my adolescence. I was the black sheep, the disappointment, the one who never quite fit the mold my father had cast. My room was messy when Rachel's was immaculate. I struggled with math while she breezed through calculus. I preferred sports and physical activities while she excelled academically. Every difference became another reason for my father to sigh heavily when looking my way. The pivotal moment came during my junior year of high school. I had been selected for an elite summer football training camp, something I had worked toward for years. The same week, my father announced he had arranged an internship for me at his law firm. "This is how you build a future, Nick. Not chasing after some ridiculous sports fantasy, but this camp could lead to college scholarships," I argued, feeling the familiar frustration building. "Scouts from major universities will be there. So you can what? Play football for 4 years and then what? Break your back for minimum wage? No son of mine is going to waste his potential like that." Something in me snapped that day. 17 years of trying to earn his approval came crashing down. "Maybe I don't want to be your son anymore," I shouted. "Maybe I'm tired of never being good enough for you." The look on his face wasn't anger, which I could have handled. It was confirmation, as if I had finally proven what he had suspected all along, that I wasn't worth his time or pride. "Then stop wasting my time," he said coldly. "When you decide to grow up and take your future seriously, we can talk." I went to the football camp anyway, against his wishes. When I returned home, it was like I had become invisible to him. He would speak to me only when absolutely necessary. Usually, through my mother. "Tell your son dinner is ready." Not "tell Nick," but "tell your son." As if he couldn't bear to speak my name. The day after high school graduation, I enlisted in the military. Part of me hoped it would finally make him proud, that serving my country would be the thing that earned his respect. A bigger part just needed to escape the constant disappointment that hung in our house like a fog. Basic training was brutal, but in some ways easier than living under my father's roof. At least in the military, the rules were clear and the expectations consistent. Excel physically, follow orders, work as a team, and you were rewarded. There was a clarity to it that I had never experienced at home. My first deployment came 6 months after completing training. I remember calling home the night before shipping out. My mother cried. Rachel made me promise to stay safe. My father simply said, "Do your duty," before handing the phone back to my mother. Over the next 12 years, I served 4 tours overseas. The military became my real family. My unit mates understood me in ways my blood relatives never had. We protected each other, relied on each other, celebrated and mourned together. The brotherhood I found there filled the hole that had been growing inside me since childhood. During those years, I maintained regular contact with my mother and sister. Mom would send care packages filled with homemade cookies that I would share with my unit. Rachel would email me updates about her life and occasionally legal advice for friends in my unit who needed it. My father rarely communicated directly. Sometimes he would add a brief postscript to my mother's letters. "Your father says to stay alert," or "Dad wants you to know the garage roof was finally fixed." Impersonal notes that could have been addressed to anyone. 4 years passed since my last visit home. My most recent deployment had been extended multiple times, and previous leave periods had been spent traveling or with friends from my unit. The distance had become comfortable, a buffer against old wounds. Then, last month, my mother's letters took on a different tone. "Your father isn't saying anything, but I think he misses you," she wrote. "He keeps your graduation photo on his desk now. I caught him looking at your medals the other day." Another letter mentioned that my father had been working fewer hours, seemed more reflective. People change, Nick. Sometimes they just need time. The final nudge came 3 weeks before Christmas. "It would mean the world to have you home this year. The whole family together again. Whatever happened in the past, we're still your family." Something in her words broke through the walls I had built. Maybe it was time to try again. Maybe enough years had passed for wounds to heal. I requested leave for the holidays, planning to surprise them all on Christmas Eve. Looking back, I should have known better. Some distances can't be crossed with a plane ticket and good intentions. Getting leave approved during the holidays is about as easy as finding a snowman in the desert. Everyone wants those precious December days to be with family. I had seniority on my side. Plus, I hadn't taken a holiday leave in 4 years. Even so, it took calling in favors and promising extra shifts in January to make it happen. When the approval finally came through, I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. Excitement to see my mother and sister. Dread at facing my father. I tried focusing on the positive as I made arrangements, booking flights and arranging transport from the airport to my parents' house. The next phase was shopping. I wanted the gifts to be perfect, thoughtful reminders that, despite the distance, I still knew them. For my mother, I found a handcrafted silver necklace with birthstones, representing each family member. For Rachel, first edition copies of her favorite childhood books, which had taken weeks to track down. For my father, that was harder. What do you get for someone who has always found you lacking? After wandering aimlessly through stores for hours, I finally settled on a vintage fountain pen set. My father had always valued practicality and craftsmanship. Maybe it wasn't personal enough. But nothing felt right. 2 days before my scheduled departure, I texted my mother. I didn't reveal my plans, wanting to keep the element of surprise, but I tested the waters. "How's everyone doing? Anything special planned for Christmas this year?" Her response came quickly. "The usual, dear. Rachel and Daniel are coming over Christmas Eve. Wish you could be here too. Your father was just saying the other day how quiet the house feels." That last part gave me pause. It didn't sound like the father I knew. But people change, right? Maybe time and distance had softened his view of me. Maybe Mom was right. And this could be a new beginning. I was packing my duffel bag when my phone buzzed with a message. Seeing my father's name on the screen was surprising enough. He rarely contacted me directly. The content of his message was like a physical blow. "Christmas is better without you. Better not come." 8 words that reopened every childhood wound. I sat on the edge of my hotel bed, phone clutched in suddenly numb fingers, and felt 17 again, desperate for approval that never came. I read the message again and again, analyzing each word as if there might be some hidden meaning, some explanation that would hurt less. There wasn't. The message was brutally clear. My first instinct was anger. How dare he? After all these years, after serving my country, after trying so hard, I still wasn't welcome in my own family home. My finger hovered over the call button, 1,000 angry responses burning in my throat. But decades of military discipline had taught me restraint. Instead of the paragraph of hurt and rage I wanted to send, I typed one word: understood. Professional. Distant. Final. Then I methodically canceled everything. The flights. The rental car. I called my commanding officer and told him I would be available for duty over Christmas after all. He didn't ask questions, just said, "We'll be glad to have you, Sergeant." That night in my barracks room, I broke my own rule and drank alone. Not enough to get drunk, just enough to dull the edges of the pain. I stared at the wrapped presents in the corner of my room and wondered what to do with them now. The rational part of my brain tried to make sense of it. Maybe he was sick and didn't want me to see him vulnerable. Maybe there was family drama I didn't know about. Maybe he was protecting me from something. The wounded part of me knew better. He simply didn't want me there. Never had. The next morning, I volunteered for every shit detail available. Anything to keep busy, to stay out of my head. My unit mates noticed something was off, but in typical military fashion, they didn't pry. Instead, they included me in their plans, making sure I wasn't alone. "Coming to Johnson's place for Christmas Eve poker?" Martinez asked casually, as if it were any other invitation. "Garcia's wife is cooking enough for a platoon on Christmas Day," Williams added. "She said to drag your sorry ass along." I appreciated their efforts, but their kindness only highlighted what I was missing. What I had always missed. A family that wanted me around. Christmas Eve arrived with forced cheer throughout the base. I attended the poker game, laughed at the right moments, lost $20 on purpose to keep the mood light. All the while, my phone burned a hole in my pocket. No messages from my mother or sister. They didn't know I had planned to come. As far as they knew, it was just another Christmas with me deployed. Only my father knew the truth. Only he knew what he had stolen. Christmas morning, my phone started ringing. First my mother, then Rachel. I let the calls go to voicemail, not trusting myself to maintain the lie that everything was fine. Their messages were the usual holiday wishes, tinged with the familiar sadness of another Christmas apart. "Merry Christmas, honey. We miss you so much. Stay safe and call when you can. Hey, little brother. Not the same without you here. Daniel says hi. Call Mom. Okay?" She always gets emotional this time of year. No mention of a disrupted plan. No indication they knew what my father had done. I wondered if he'd even told them I had tried to come home. I spent Christmas Day helping in the mess hall, serving holiday meals to the few soldiers who, like me, had nowhere else to go. There was comfort in the routine, in focusing on others instead of my own broken family ties. We ate turkey that was slightly too dry, stuffing that came from a box, and pie that had never seen a real pumpkin. But we were together, united in our solitude. That night, I placed the carefully wrapped presents in a box and addressed it to my parents' house. No note. No explanation. Just gifts that would arrive late and raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. For 5 days, I went through the motions. Wake up. Physical training. Duties. Meals. Sleep. Repeat. I didn't answer personal calls. I didn't check messages. I built a wall between myself and anything that might crack the careful numbness I had constructed. I should have known the real world would eventually break through. On December 30th, I finished my shift and checked my phone for the first time in days. The screen showed 10 missed calls, 4 from my mother, 3 from Rachel, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize, and 1 from someone listed as Goldstein Law Offices. My stomach dropped. A lawyer? What could have happened that would involve legal matters? The voicemails progressed from normal to increasingly panicked. Mom. December 27th. Nick. Honey. Could you call me back when you get a chance? Just want to make sure you're okay. Rachel. Later that same day. Hey Nick. Mom's worried because she hasn't heard from you. Give one of us a call. Okay? Mom. December 28th. Nicholas. Please call home. as soon as you get this. It's important. Rachel, December 29th. Nick, this is serious. Call me immediately. It's about Dad. The last voicemail was from a man with a deep, professional voice. This is Howard Goldstein, your family's attorney. Please contact me as soon as possible regarding an urgent family matter. You can reach me at this number at any time. My hands were shaking as I called Rachel back. She answered on the first ring. Nick, thank God. Where have you been? We've been trying to reach you for days. On duty, I said. The partial lie bitter on my tongue. What's going on? Why is a lawyer calling me? There was a pause, followed by the unmistakable sound of my sister trying not to cry. Rachel never cried. Whatever had happened was bad. It's Dad, she finally said. Her voice small. He had a massive heart attack on Christmas morning. He's in intensive care. The doctors, they're not sure if he's going to make it. The world tilted sideways. My father, Richard Wells, the immovable object of my childhood, the man who seemed carved from granite, was lying in a hospital bed fighting for his life. What happened? I managed to ask. He seemed fine during gift opening. Then he stood up suddenly, clutched his chest, and collapsed. The ambulance came quickly, but her voice broke. He was asking for you, Nick, before he lost consciousness. He kept saying your name. The information didn't compute. My father? Asking for me? The same man who had explicitly told me not to come home just days earlier? Are you sure? I asked, unable to keep the disbelief from my voice. Yes. I was right there. But that's not all. Mom found something on his phone later that day. Nick, did Dad contact you recently? I swallowed hard. He texted me on the 23rd. What did he say? That I shouldn't come for Christmas. That it was better without me. Rachel's gasp was audible. Oh my God. Mom found that message when she was trying to contact his business partner. She had no idea. None of us knew you were planning to come home. The pieces started falling into place, creating a picture I wasn't prepared to see. He never told you? I asked. No. Mom has been beside herself since finding that text. She couldn't understand why he would say such a thing. Nick, none of us knew you were trying to come home. We would have. God, this is such a mess. I sat down heavily on my bunk, trying to process everything. What does the lawyer want? Dad updated his will last month. Apparently, there are some documents you need to sign, regardless of what happens. And, she hesitated. There's a letter for you. Dad made Dr. Goldstein promise to give it to you personally, if anything happened to him. A letter? My father had never written me a letter in my entire life. Birthday cards came from Mom and Dad, but were always in my mother's handwriting. This made no sense. I need to talk to my commanding officer, I said, military efficiency kicking in to mask my emotional turmoil. I'll request emergency leave. How soon can you get here? The hope in Rachel's voice was painful to hear. I'll be on the first available flight. Text me the hospital details. After ending the call, I sat motionless for several minutes, trying to reconcile the father who had rejected me with the man who had apparently been asking for me as he faced death. Arranging emergency leave was easier than my holiday request had been. Within hours, I had approval and was booking a red-eye flight. As I threw essentials into my bag, my mind raced with questions. Why had my father told me not to come, only to ask for me when he fell ill? What was in the letter he had left? And why involve a lawyer in what should have been a simple family matter? The flight was a blur of uncomfortable seats and scattered sleep. I kept checking my phone during layovers for updates, but Rachel only confirmed that our father remained in critical condition, unconscious but stable. As the plane began its descent into my hometown airport, I gazed out at the familiar landscape below. Rolling hills, neat subdivisions, the river cutting through downtown. It looked exactly the same as when I had left all those years ago. I was coming home after all, but not to the Christmas reunion I had imagined. Instead, I was rushing toward a hospital bed, and what might be final words with a man I had never truly understood. Rachel was waiting for me at the airport, her usual polished appearance replaced by tired eyes and rumpled clothes. She had always been the put-together one, never a hair out of place. But crisis had stripped away that veneer. She looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way I had rarely seen since we were children. "Nick," she said simply, and pulled me into a fierce hug. We held each other for a long moment, neither wanting to be the first to let go. The drive to the hospital was tense, with unspoken questions. Rachel filled me in on our father's condition, her attorney's precision showing through despite her exhaustion. Triple bypass surgery yesterday. The main artery was 90% blocked. 2 others at 70 and 60%. The doctors said it's a miracle he lasted this long. Without an incident. "No symptoms before this?" I asked, watching familiar streets pass by the window. Rachel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Apparently he's been having chest pains for months. He made his doctor promise not to tell Mom." Typical of our father, facing even heart disease as a private battle. Weakness was not something Richard Wells ever acknowledged. "How's Mom holding up?" Rachel's expression softened. "She hasn't left his side except when they forced her to during surgery. She's blaming herself for not noticing the signs." We fell silent as the hospital came into view. A looming white structure with rows of identical windows. Inside those walls, our father was fighting for his life, and I was still fighting to understand why he had pushed me away. The antiseptic smell hit me as soon as we entered, triggering memories of military hospitals, of friends patched up after combat. Rachel led me through a maze of corridors, to the cardiac intensive care unit. Through the window of the waiting area, I spotted my mother immediately, her silver hair unmistakable even from behind. She turned at the sound of the door, and her face crumpled. "Nick," she whispered, rising unsteadily. "You came." I crossed the room in 3 strides and enveloped her in my arms. She felt frailer than I remembered. Bird bones and soft skin, trembling slightly against my chest. "Of course I came," I said into her hair. "How is he?" She pulled back to look at me, eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Stable for now. The surgery went as well as could be expected. But there were complications because of how long he waited to get help." Her voice caught. "The doctor can explain it better," as if summoned by her words. A tall man in a white coat approached. "Mrs. Wells," the nurse mentioned, "your son had arrived." "I'm Dr. Anderson, your husband's cardiologist." We shook hands, and I was struck by how young he looked to be making life and death decisions. Then again, I had seen 19-year-old soldiers do the same on battlefields. "Your father's condition is serious but stable," Dr. Anderson explained. "The bypass surgery addressed the immediate blockages, but his heart sustained significant damage, both from the attack and from what appears to be years of untreated hypertension and stress." "Years?" I echoed. He never mentioned any heart problems. Dr. Anderson's expression was carefully neutral. "According to his primary care physician, your father has been managing coronary artery disease for at least 5 years. He declined several recommended procedures during that time." 5 years. While I had been overseas, my father had been waging a private war against his own body, never saying a word to any of us. "Can we see him?" I asked, briefly. "He's heavily sedated, but sometimes patients can hear even when they appear unconscious. Familiar voices can be beneficial." He led us through double doors into the ICU. Each bed was surrounded by machines, their steady beeping, a technological heartbeat, filling the room. My father was in the 3rd bed, partially obscured by equipment. Nothing had prepared me for the shock of seeing him. Richard Wells had always been a commanding presence, tall and broad-shouldered, his posture military straight despite never having served. The man in the hospital bed was a diminished version, pale and sunken against white sheets, tubes snaking from his nose, arms, and chest. "Dad," I said softly, moving to his bedside. His eyes remained closed, his breathing shallow and mechanical with the assistance of oxygen. My mother took his limp hand between hers. "Richard, Nick is here. He came all the way from his base. Can you hear us?" No response. Just the steady beep of monitors and the whoosh of oxygen. After a few minutes, a nurse gently suggested we return to the waiting area. The doctor will update you if there's any change. Try to rest if you can. Back in the waiting room, my mother reached for a worn leather bag beside her chair. Nick, there's something you should see. She withdrew a small book, bound in faded brown leather. I found this in your father's desk when I was looking for insurance information. It's his journal. I stared at the innocuous object. His what? He started keeping it a few years ago. His doctor suggested it to help manage stress. She held it out to me. I think he would want you to read it. I hesitated. Reading someone's private thoughts felt like an invasion, especially someone as private as my father. Mom, I don't think. Please, she said, pressing it into my hands. Especially the entries from the past month. I think you need to see them. Rachel nodded in agreement. It might help you understand, Nick. The last few pages. They explain a lot. Reluctantly, I accepted the journal, running my fingers over the worn cover. It felt heavy with more than just paper and binding. Weighted with unspoken words and secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. I'll give you some privacy, my mother said, standing. Rachel, would you help me find some decent coffee? Once alone, I opened the journal to the most recent entries, feeling like an intruder in my father's mind. The handwriting was recognizable, but shakier than I remembered. The once precise letters now slanting unevenly across the page. The 10th of December. Dr. Graham says the new medication isn't working as well as hoped. Options narrowing. Haven't told Margaret. What would be the point? Just cause more worry. The 15th of December. Margaret mentioned Nick might come home for Christmas. Mixed feelings. Part of me wants to see him. The other part, well, easier this way. Clean break when the time comes. I flipped forward, my heart rate increasing. The 20th of December. Decided today. Better for Nick to stay away. Better he remembers me as I was. Not this broken down old man. Not fair to have him come all this way just to watch me deteriorate. Margaret would tell him to come anyway. She always believed in confronting things head on. I'm too tired for confrontations now. The 23rd of December. Sent the message to Nick today. Hardest thing I've ever done. Told him not to come. Made it harsh enough that he wouldn't argue. Better he hates me than watches me die. Clean break. He has his life. Good career. Respect. That's what matters. Not old grudges. Not a deathbed reconciliation. That wouldn't fix anything anyway. The journal fell from my suddenly numb fingers. My father hadn't rejected me. He had been trying, in his own twisted way, to protect me. I retrieved the fallen journal with shaking hands and continued reading, hungry now for the insights into a man I had never truly understood. The 2nd of November. Met with Goldstein today to update the will. He thinks I'm being paranoid, but better to have everything in order. Set up the trust fund for Nick. Should have done it years ago, but pride got in the way. Too many years wasted on pride. The 10th of November. Watched a video of Nick's unit receiving commendations today. Found it online. He's done well for himself. Stands tall in his uniform. Confident. Respected. Did that despite me. Not because of me. Have to admit that now. The 15th of November. Bad day. Tests show the blockage is worse. Graham wants to schedule surgery immediately. I'm not ready yet. Need to get things in order first. Told him after the new year. He wasn't happy. But it's my choice to make. The entries continued. A window into my father's thoughts that I had never been granted while he was conscious. There were reflections on his marriage, pride in Rachel's accomplishments, and regrets. So many regrets, particularly about me. The 28th of November. Found myself looking at old photos today. Nick at his high school graduation. Already had that military bearing, even then. Knew he was leaving us. Knew it was largely my fault. Too hard on him. Always too hard. Thought I was preparing him for a tough world. Instead, I pushed him into it before he was ready. Before I was ready to let him go, the door to the waiting room opened, and I quickly closed the journal as Rachel returned with 2 coffee cups. Mom's talking to Dr. Anderson again, she said, handing me one of the cups. How far did you get? Far enough to know Dad's been sick for a while. And that he didn't want me to see him like this. Rachel sighed and sat beside me. There's more to it than that, Nick. When Mom found that text he sent you, she confronted him about it. They had a huge fight right before it happened. What kind of fight? The kind where decades of unspoken things finally get said. Rachel stared into her coffee. Mom told him she was tired of how he treated you. That she should have stood up for you years ago. She said his pride had cost him a relationship with his son, and now it might be too late to fix it. I tried to imagine my mother, the perpetual peacemaker, finally reaching her breaking point. What did he say? According to Mom, he just kept repeating that he was trying to protect you. That you had built a good life without him, and he didn't want to disrupt it with his problems. She looked up at me, eyes glistening. The last thing Mom said to him before he collapsed was that you deserved the chance to make your own choice about coming home. The weight of this revelation settled heavily on my shoulders. My parents had fought about me, and minutes later, my father had suffered a heart attack. The timing could be coincidental, but the guilt remained. It's not your fault, Rachel said, reading my expression. Dad's heart was a ticking time bomb. Dr. Anderson said he's surprised it didn't happen sooner. Before I could respond, the waiting room door opened again. This time it was a short, balding man in an expensive suit. Nicholas Wells? He asked, glancing between Rachel and me. That's me, I confirmed, standing. Howard Goldstein, he said, extending his hand. I'm your family's attorney. I've been trying to reach you. We shook hands, and he took a seat across from us, placing his briefcase on the coffee table. I understand this is a difficult time, but there are some matters your father asked me to discuss with you specifically, should he become incapacitated. Can't this wait? Rachel asked, protective instinct flaring. Our father is fighting for his life. Goldstein's expression softened. I wouldn't be here if your father hadn't been extremely clear about the timing. He was quite insistent that Nicholas should be informed immediately if anything happened. I nodded for him to continue, curious despite the circumstances. 3 months ago, your father came to my office to make significant changes to his will and establish a trust. Goldstein removed several documents from his briefcase. Among those changes was the creation of a trust fund in your name, Nicholas. A trust fund? I echoed, confused. Why would he do that? He said it was, and I quote, long overdue compensation for opportunities denied. Goldstein slid a document toward me. This is merely an overview. The full details are quite extensive. I scanned the paper, my confusion growing. The amount listed was substantial. Far more than I would have expected my father to set aside for me. There's something else, Goldstein continued, removing an envelope from his briefcase. Your father left this letter with explicit instructions that it be delivered to you personally in the event of his serious illness or death. The envelope was simple white stationery, my name written on the front in my father's distinctive handwriting, steadier than in his recent journal entries. This letter had been written some time ago. He gave this to you recently? I asked, turning the envelope over. 2 months ago, Goldstein confirmed. He was quite specific about its importance. Before I could open it, a commotion in the hallway caught our attention. Through the waiting room window, I could see medical staff rushing toward my father's room. The sudden increase in activity sent a chill through me. Code Blue, ICU Room 4. Code Blue, ICU Room 4, announced a calm voice over the intercom system. Rachel was on her feet immediately. That's Dad's room. We rushed into the hallway, nearly colliding with our mother, who stood pale and shaking as medical personnel streamed past her into my father's room. His heart, she whispered. It just stopped. Time seemed to slow as we watched through the window while the medical team worked to restart my father's heart. Dr. Anderson performing chest compressions, a nurse preparing a defibrillator, another administering medications through the IV. The controlled urgency of their movements was both reassuring and terrifying. Clear, called Dr. Anderson, and my father's body jerked as the electric current passed through it. Nothing. Again. Charging to 300. Clear. Another jolt. Another moment of suspended breath. Then, miraculously, the monitor began to beep again. Erratic at first, then steadying into a rhythm. Dr. Anderson emerged from the room minutes later, his scrubs dampened with sweat. We've stabilized him for now, but this was a significant setback. The next 24 hours will be critical. As he explained the technical details of what had happened, my father's letter burned in my pocket, unread. Whatever he had wanted to tell me might now go unheard if he didn't survive the night. The thought filled me with a strange, unexpected grief, a mourning for conversations we had never had and might never get the chance to have. That night, I stayed at the hospital while Rachel took our exhausted mother home for a few hours of rest. Sitting beside my father's bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest now supported by a ventilator, I finally opened his letter. The pages inside were filled with the strong, confident handwriting I remembered from childhood, not the shaky script of his recent journal entries. This letter had been written before his condition had deteriorated significantly. Nick, if you're reading this, it means I've either died or am well on my way there. Neither circumstance lends itself to the conversation we should have had years ago. But perhaps that's fitting. I've never been good at saying the important things out loud. First, the practical matters. I've established a trust in your name. It's not an apology. Or at least, not only that. It's an acknowledgement that I denied you opportunities in pursuit of a path I had chosen for you, not one you had chosen for yourself. The trust is yours without conditions or expectations. Use it as you see fit. Now for the harder part. I owe you an explanation, though not excuses. There are none for how I treated you. My father believed that showing affection to his sons would make us weak. His father believed the same. For generations, the men in our family have been taught that love is expressed through discipline and high expectations, not through words or embraces. I swore I would be different, but when you were born, I found myself falling into the same patterns, hearing my father's voice come out of my mouth. You were so different from me. So free with your emotions. So determined to forge your own path. It terrified me because I didn't know how to protect someone like you from a world that had always seemed hostile to me. So I tried to remake you in my image, thinking it would prepare you, never realizing I was causing the very pain I feared you would experience. By the time I recognized what I was doing, the distance between us had grown too wide to bridge with simple apologies. Your decision to enlist both filled me with pride and confirmed my greatest fear, that I had driven you away completely. I've followed your military career from afar. The commendations, the promotions, the respect you've earned. You've become a better man than I ever was, and you did it without my guidance, perhaps because of its absence. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Some mistakes run too deep for that. But I want you to know that my failure to express it never meant an absence of love. I have always been proud of you, Nick. Always. Even when I couldn't say it. Live well, be happy, and if you can, try not to pass our family's legacy of silence to the next generation. Your father, Richard. I read the letter twice, then a third time. Tears blurring the words. All those years of feeling inadequate, of thinking I had failed to meet his standards, when in reality, he had been fighting his own battle against patterns established generations before either of us was born. It didn't erase the pain or heal the rift between us overnight, but it offered something I had never expected from my father. Honesty and vulnerability. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in its envelope, then looked at the unconscious man in the hospital bed. For the first time, I saw not just my father, but a man who was the product of his own upbringing, trapped in cycles he hadn't created but hadn't managed to break either. I heard you, Dad, I said quietly to his still form. I finally heard you. Morning came with no change in my father's condition. I had dozed intermittently in the uncomfortable chair beside his bed, waking at every change in the rhythm of the machines, monitoring his vital signs. The night shift nurses had been kind, bringing extra blankets and coffee, understanding, without being told that I couldn't bear to leave. My mother arrived early, looking marginally more rested but still worn. She touched my father's forehead gently, then turned to me. You read the letter, she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Did you know what it said? Not exactly. But I had an idea. Your father started trying to change after his diagnosis. Too little. Too late. Perhaps. but genuine nonetheless. We sat together in the quiet room, the only sounds the mechanical breathing of the ventilator and the steady beep of the heart monitor. "I keep thinking about that text message," I said finally. "If he hadn't sent it, you would have been home for Christmas," she finished. "You might have been there when it happened. I might have been able to help." She took my hand. "Or you might have had your last memory of him be a collapse at the Christmas tree. He was trying to protect you, in his own misguided way, by pushing me away? Again?" The anger I had been suppressing rose suddenly. He had no right to make that decision for me. No right to decide what I could or couldn't handle. "You're right," she agreed. Surprising me, it was wrong. I told him so, right before. She gestured at the hospital bed. Richard always thought he knew best for everyone. It was his greatest flaw as a father and as a husband. The admission startled me. My mother had always defended my father's decisions, had always been the buffer between his harshness and my sensitivity. "Why did you stay with him?" I asked, the question escaping before I could consider its implications. She didn't seem offended. "Because I loved him. Because there was more good than bad, though you might not have seen it. And because I believed he could change." She looked at my father's still form. He was trying to. At the end, I wasn't ready to forgive so easily. The letter had offered explanation, but not absolution. Decades of feeling inadequate couldn't be erased by one moment of posthumous honesty. Especially when my father had chosen to send that final rejecting message, rather than welcome me home. "I need some air," I said, standing abruptly. In the hospital courtyard, I paced under a gray winter sky, my breath forming clouds in the cold air. The anger I felt was complex, layered with grief and confusion. Anger at my father for his final rejection. Anger at myself for still caring after all this time. Anger at the wasted years and missed opportunities. "Rough day, son?" came a voice behind me. I turned to find an elderly man in a hospital robe and slippers, an IV pole beside him. His face was deeply lined, his thin white hair ruffled by the breeze. "Something like that," I admitted. "Let me guess. Family troubles?" He smiled at my surprised expression. Hospital courtyards are where people come to escape family troubles. That, or to smoke, without the nurses yelling at them. He gestured to a nearby bench. "Mind if I join you? Doctor says I need to walk, but I need to sit more." I helped him settle on the bench, noting the military tattoo on his forearm as his sleeve rode up. "Marines?" I asked. 30 years, he confirmed. "Korea and Vietnam. You serve?" "Army." 12 years so far. He nodded approvingly. Thought I recognized the bearing. "So, what's got you wearing a trench in the concrete? Parent or spouse?" "Father," I said, surprised at my willingness to confide in a stranger. "Heart attack. It's complicated. Fathers and sons usually are," he said with a knowing look. My old man was a right bastard. Tougher than shoe leather, and about as flexible. We butted heads from the day I could talk back, until the day he died. "Did you ever resolve things?" I asked, suddenly desperate for guidance. Not in the Hollywood movie sense. No tearful reconciliation, no dramatic confessions. He adjusted his position on the bench, but I made my peace with him, and more importantly, with who I became because of him, and sometimes in spite of him. How? By accepting that he was just a man, not the titan I'd built him up to be in my head. A flawed, ordinary man who did his best with the tools he had. Even if his best wasn't always good enough, we sat in silence for a moment, watching a cardinal land on a nearby bush, a flash of red against the winter browns. "The hardest part of growing up," the old Marine continued, "is realizing our parents are just people. They make mistakes. They carry their own baggage. They fail sometimes, especially when they care the most." His words echoed the sentiments in my father's letter, the acknowledgement of generational patterns and failures passed from father to son. "What if it's too late?" I asked. "What if there's no time left to fix things?" He considered this. "Then you fix what you can within yourself. Forgiveness isn't always about the other person, son. Sometimes it's about freeing yourself from carrying anger that only hurts you." A nurse appeared at the courtyard entrance, calling the old man's name. He stood slowly, gripping his IV pole. "Think about what you want to carry forward and what you need to leave behind," he said as he prepared to go. "That's the only power we really have when it comes to family legacies." I thanked him and watched him shuffle back toward the hospital entrance, his words settling into my consciousness. What did I want to carry forward? What was I ready to leave behind? Back in my father's room, I found Rachel had joined our mother. They were speaking in low voices that stopped when I entered. "Any change?" I asked. "The doctors are cautiously optimistic," Rachel reported. "His vitals are stabilizing. They're going to try reducing the sedation later today to see if he regains consciousness." I took my place at the bedside, studying my father's face. Even unconscious, there was a tension around his mouth, as if he couldn't fully relax, even in this state. "I've been reading more of his journal," I told them, removing it from my jacket pocket. "There's an entry from last year about his own father. Our grandfather." I opened to the page I had marked, found myself becoming my father today. That tone of voice, that dismissive wave of the hand, caught myself just as I was about to tell the Henderson boy he was wasting his potential. Stopped, remembered how those words felt when they were directed at me. At Nick. The cycle continues unless someone breaks it. Too late for Nick and me. But maybe not too late to break the pattern in myself. "He was trying," I said, more to myself than to them. In his own way, he was trying. The rest of the day passed in the strange timelessness of hospital vigils. Doctors came and went. Nurses checked vitals and adjusted medications. Late in the afternoon, Dr. Anderson arrived to begin the process of reducing my father's sedation. "It will take time," he warned us. "And he may be confused or agitated when he first regains consciousness. That's normal. After what he's been through." We waited, alternating between anxious silence and forced small talk. As evening approached, my father began showing signs of waking, his fingers twitching, eyelids fluttering. Then, shortly after 8 p.m., he opened his eyes. At first, his gaze was unfocused, scanning the room without recognition. Then he saw my mother and reached weakly for her hand. She took it, tears streaming down her face. "Richard, we're here. All of us." Nick came home. His eyes found me, widening slightly. Recognition, surprise, and something else. Something that might have been relief. The ventilator prevented him from speaking, but he squeezed my mother's hand and continued staring at me, as if confirming I was really there. Dr. Anderson arrived quickly, checking vitals and responses, asking my father simple questions that he could answer with nods or head shakes. Satisfied with the responses, he authorized the removal of the ventilator, replacing it with a nasal cannula for supplemental oxygen. "Don't try to talk too much at first," he advised my father. "Your throat will be sore from the tube." Once the medical staff had left, a heavy silence fell over the room. What do you say to someone who might have died believing you hated them? Who might still die before reconciliation is possible? "You should rest," my mother told my father, smoothing his thin hair. "We can talk tomorrow." He shook his head slightly, his eyes still fixed on me. When he spoke, his voice was a raspy whisper. "Nick, you got my message?" "Yes," I said, uncertain which message he meant. The cruel text, or the explanatory letter. "Shouldn't have come. Didn't want this." He gestured weakly at the hospital room, the machines, his own diminished state. The old anger flared again. "That wasn't your choice to make, Nick," my mother cautioned. But I continued, "You don't get to decide what I can handle. You never did. But you always tried to anyway." My father closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. "Protecting you." "No," I said firmly. "Controlling me." "There's a difference." Rachel stood. "Maybe this isn't the best time." "When would be a better time?" I asked, years of unspoken frustration spilling over. "When he's stronger? When we can pretend everything's fine again? When we can go back to not saying what needs to be said?" To everyone's surprise, my father raised a hand weakly. "Let him speak," he rasped. "He's right." The simple acknowledgement stunned me into temporary silence. I read your letter, I said finally, and your journal. I understand better now. But understanding isn't the same as accepting. You had no right to send that text. No right to push me away one last time. He nodded slightly. I know. Then why did you do it? Afraid, he whispered. Not of dying. Of you seeing me like this. Weak. Failing. I wanted you to remember me strong. That was your pride talking. Not love. He flinched as if I had struck him, but nodded again. Yes. The simple admission deflated some of my anger. This diminished man in the hospital bed was accepting my accusations without defense, something the father of my childhood would never have done. I would have come anyway, I told him. If you had told me the truth, I still would have come. I know that now. His voice was fading, the brief conversation taking its toll. I'm sorry, Nick. Not just for the text. For everything. The words I had never expected to hear from him, spoken with a sincerity I couldn't question given his condition. Part of me wanted to hold on to the anger, to make him work harder for forgiveness, but the old Marine's words came back to me. What did I want to carry forward? What was I ready to leave behind? I need time, I said honestly. This doesn't fix everything. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. Until we've had the conversations we should have had years ago. Relief visibly washed over him. Fair, he whispered. More than fair. He closed his eyes, exhaustion claiming him, but his hand moved slightly toward me. After a moment's hesitation, I took it. His fingers were cool and dry, frailer than I remembered, but his grip was surprisingly firm. In that small connection, I felt something shift between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. A door long closed that had opened just enough to let in a sliver of light. I extended my leave by 2 weeks, calling in every favor I had accumulated over 12 years of service. My commanding officer was understanding. Having lost his own father the previous year, family comes first, Wells, he said. We'll manage without you. Those 2 weeks became the most intensive period of family therapy we had never had. As my father's strength gradually returned, our conversations deepened, sometimes just the two of us, sometimes with my mother or Rachel present. We began the painful process of excavating decades of misunderstandings and hurt. I thought being hard on you was preparing you for life, my father admitted during one of our talks. My father never gave me an inch, and I believed it made me stronger. It took me too long to realize it just made me harder. You made me feel like I was never good enough, I told him, like nothing I did would ever measure up to your standards. Because nothing I did ever measured up to my father's, he replied. I was passing down what I had received, without questioning whether it was worth preserving. These conversations were exhausting for him physically and for all of us emotionally. There were setbacks, times when old patterns reasserted themselves. When my father's instinct to control, or my tendency to withdraw, threatened our fragile progress. A hospital therapist began meeting with us, helping to facilitate the difficult discussions. She introduced concepts like generational trauma and emotional inheritance that gave us a framework for understanding the patterns that had shaped our family. Breaking these cycles takes conscious effort, she explained. It requires recognizing the triggers and choosing different responses. My father was an unexpectedly willing participant in these sessions. Perhaps facing mortality had stripped away his defenses, or perhaps the heart attack had given him the push he needed to prioritize emotional healing over pride. I don't want to waste whatever time I have left, he told me. And I don't want you carrying this forward if you ever have children of your own. 3 weeks after his heart attack, my father was discharged from the hospital. The prognosis was guarded. His heart significantly damaged. But he was stable enough to continue recovery at home, under close medical supervision. I had planned to return to my unit once he was released, but the night before my scheduled departure, he asked me to stay. The trust fund, he said as we sat in the living room he had been so reluctant to welcome me into at Christmas. I want you to know why I set it up, the letter explained, I said. Compensation for opportunities denied. He shook his head. Not just that. It's seed money, if you want it to be. Seed money for what? Whatever you want. Your own business. Further education. A home. He paused. Your discharge from the military. If that's what you choose. The suggestion startled me. You want me to leave the service? After you spent years telling me it wasn't a real career? I was wrong, he said simply. And it's not about what I want anymore. It's about giving you choices I tried to take away before. The offer hung between us, unexpected and complicated. I had never considered leaving the military, having found purpose and belonging there that had eluded me in civilian life. But now, with family relationships beginning to heal, I found myself contemplating possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. I need time to think about it, I said. He nodded. Of course. No pressure. No expectations. The money is yours, regardless. I extended my leave again, this time taking accumulated vacation days I had never used. January turned to February, then March. My father's physical recovery progressed slowly, with good days and bad. Our emotional recovery followed a similar pattern, steps forward and occasional slides back. But the overall trajectory was toward healing. One evening in late March, as spring was just beginning to soften the landscape, my father and I sat on the back porch watching the sunset. I've been thinking about your offer, I said. About the trust fund. And? His voice was careful, neutral. I'm considering transitioning to the reserves. Not leaving completely, but stepping back. Maybe using part of the fund to start something here. Interest sparked in his eyes. What kind of something? A support center for veterans returning to civilian life. There's nothing like it in this area, and the need is growing. He was quiet for a moment. That sounds worthwhile, he said finally. You'd be good at that. The simple vote of confidence, delivered without qualifications or suggestions for improvement, meant more than he could know. There's a property on the edge of town that might work, I continued. The old Wilson place. I know it. Good location, needs work. He hesitated. I could help with that part. The renovations. If you wanted. It was the first time he had offered to participate in something that was entirely my idea. My vision. Not taking over. Not directing. Just offering support. I'd like that, I said. We sat in comfortable silence as the sky deepened from orange to purple. Then he turned to me, his expression serious. I want you to know something, Nick. I'm proud of you. Not because of anything you've accomplished, though there's plenty there to be proud of. I'm proud of who you are, the man you've become, despite my failures as a father. The words I had waited a lifetime to hear, delivered simply and directly, no qualifications attached. Before I could respond, he winced suddenly, pressing a hand to his chest. Dad, are you okay? Just a twinge, he said. But his face had gone pale. I called for my mother, and within minutes we were headed to the emergency room. This time, it wasn't a heart attack but a warning sign that his damaged heart was struggling. The doctors adjusted his medications and kept him overnight for observation. When I visited the next morning, he seemed frailer, the brief hospital stay having taken more out of him than the previous day's episode warranted. The doctors say you're stable, I told him, trying to sound reassuring. For now. He agreed. He gestured for me to sit. Nick, I need you to know something. What I said yesterday, about being proud of you. I meant every word. If anything happens, nothing's going to happen, I interrupted, not ready to have this conversation. If anything happens, he continued firmly. I don't want you carrying guilt or regret. These past months have been a gift I didn't deserve. Whatever time I have left is bonus. I wanted to argue, to insist he would have years ahead, but we both knew the reality of his condition. His heart was failing. The damage too extensive for complete recovery. He came home the next day. But something had shifted. He seemed to have accepted what was coming. In a way he hadn't before. He began putting his affairs in order, spending long hours with my mother, making sure she understood their finances, the details of property management, insurance matters. With me, he focused on sharing family history, stories I had never heard about his own childhood, his early years with my mother, his struggles in business. It was as if he was downloading his life experience, passing on whatever wisdom he had accumulated while he still could. April brought a brief rally, days when he seemed stronger, almost his old self. We began preliminary plans for the Veteran Center, reviewing property options, discussing potential services. These conversations were different from any we had ever had, a true collaboration rather than him directing and me resisting. Then in early May, on an unseasonably warm afternoon, he suffered a major stroke. The doctors were clear. The damage was catastrophic. He lingered for 3 days, unable to speak but occasionally squeezing our hands in response to our voices. On the third night, with all of us gathered around his bed, Richard Wells took his final breath. He went peacefully, his hand in my mother's, his family, complete around him. The reconciliation we had begun was left unfinished in one sense, but in another, it had reached its natural conclusion. We had said what needed saying. The rest would have been just details. The funeral revealed aspects of my father I had never known. Colleagues spoke of his integrity and generosity. Community members told stories of anonymous donations and quiet acts of service. Friends shared memories of loyalty and steadfast support during their own difficult times. I found myself wondering how this man, so capable of compassion and generosity with others, had struggled so profoundly to extend the same grace to his son. The family therapist had an insight that helped make sense of it. Sometimes we're hardest on those who remind us most of ourselves, she suggested. Your father may have seen his own vulnerabilities in you and tried to armor you against them in the only way he knew how. In the months that followed, I made my decision. I transitioned to the Army Reserves and used part of the trust fund to purchase the Wilson property. The Richard Wells Veterans Center opened a year later, offering support services, counseling, job training, and community for returning service members. My mother found new purpose helping with the administrative side of the center. Rachel provided legal services to veterans navigating benefits and disability claims. What had begun as my project became a family mission, a way of honoring not just my father's memory but the journey we had taken together in his final months. The deepest lesson I took from our reconciliation was not that forgiveness erases the past, but that it creates space for a different future. Understanding my father's journey didn't excuse the pain he had caused, but it helped me release the anger that had been poisoning my own life. I also learned that breaking generational patterns requires conscious choice. My father had begun that work too late to fully repair our relationship, but early enough to show me it was possible. Now, as I consider my own future, possibly including marriage and children someday, I carry that awareness with me. The legacy I choose to pass on will not be one of rigid expectations and withheld approval. Instead, I hope to create a heritage of open communication, of emotions expressed rather than suppressed, of love offered without conditions. My father's final gift wasn't the trust fund, but the opportunity to see him as a whole person, flawed and struggling but ultimately trying his best with the tools he had. In that recognition, I found freedom, not just from his judgment, but from my own. The healing continues, an ongoing process rather than a destination reached. Some days are harder than others. Sometimes I still find myself angry at the years wasted, the relationship we might have had, but those moments pass more quickly now, replaced by gratitude for the reconciliation we did achieve, however imperfect and incomplete. In the end, what matters most is not that we finish the journey, but that we have the courage to begin it. My father found that courage in his final months. It's a legacy worth carrying forward, one conscious choice at a time. Have you ever experienced a difficult family reconciliation? Or are you currently dealing with a complicated relationship with a parent or child? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our stories helps others know they're not alone in these struggles. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. And share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to begin healing, even if complete resolution isn't possible. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. And remember, the cycles that hurt us don't have to continue through us.